The Chris Johnston Show.
Let's go!
Your number one destination for a behind-the-scenes look at the game of hockey.
Is this thing on?
Here's NHL insider Chris Johnston and host Julian McKenzie.
Before we get going on our show today, happy birthday to one Chris Johnston. Another year around the sun. We love you, buddy. From everyone here at the SDPN, I can't speak. I've already said all my praises I could say about you, but why not say more for a man I've grown to admire and appreciate as a friend and podcast partner and teammate at The Athletic. All the best to you on your birthday, buddy. Hopefully you're able to enjoy it today.
Thanks, man. Yeah, it's a busy day, but it's I feel actually pretty grateful to be able to work and do all the things I love and still be feeling energized and excited. So I'm decidedly probably in middle age at this point, but the birthdays look a little different than they once did. I'm looking forward to like a chill dinner and watching some baseball later on the other side of this, all this work between then and now. But yeah, thanks, pal. Everything's great. And here's to a great year.
Of course, Ryan. And in advance, I mean, between that and your run streak hitting 2,000 days next week, that's going to be, you're in for a lot of celebrating as far as I'm concerned. So great time to be one Chris Johnston.
Thanks, man. Yeah, a few zero beers tonight, maybe. We'll see.
You deserve them. Anyways, let's move on to a fan base that maybe did a little bit of celebrating of their own last night. It's been a bit of a weird week and a weird time for the Buffalo Sabres. They started off the year in some tough straits. We kind of brought them up on our last podcast with their start. And then after that, they go on to lose to the Colorado Avalanche, and a fan throws a jersey on the ice. Even the media veils. You see Tage Thompson get a little testy. They really needed that win over the Ottawa Senators on Wednesday, and they blew them out, an 8-4 victory. Even with that victory, though, how do you measure what's going on with the Buffalo Sabres and their start? I wonder how much that victory contributes anything in terms of stopping the bleeding with what's been going on there.
Well, how much that decisive win matters tells you just how unique the situation is, because we are obviously at the start of the second week of the NHL regular season. What we all know is a long season. Typically any team, positively or negatively, you and I are going to hit on here these next few weeks that will always come with certain qualifiers that it's early and, things can happen. But Buffalo's its own unique case, right? And I do think that there's certainly a lot of talk around the league circles just about what will happen there if they don't get it right. And, the thing I would caution everyone at this point to say is they haven't necessarily got it wrong this season. It's just, you start 0-3. They had 2 goals through those first 3 games. Naturally, fans have every right to further unrest, and I think the pointed questions are fair. And the only way the Sabres can push back on it is to show that they're better than they've been, right? To truly get in a playoff race and make the playoffs again. And I actually do think they have a roster that it's not a preposterous suggestion, but they're gonna have to almost push through some of all these feelings, these doubts, these, the fact that the minute something goes a little bit wrong, it's probably going to feel a little bit worse in their market because it's 14 years of things going wrong. And that's part of the challenge that they face that I think is unique even from other teams. I look at a Chicago, for them, certainly a nice start. They had a big win in St. Louis on Wednesday, and you're trying to shed the vibes of like, this is a team that's at the bottom every year, right? I think, well, it's not easy for Chicago. It's even harder in a place like Buffalo. I'm just contrasting the two situations because, of course, during the streak that the Sabres have made the playoffs, Chicago's actually mixed in a cup win in that time, right? So, it's as far off as the Blackhawks have felt the last number of seasons. It's not what Buffalo is. So, yeah, I think it's a huge win. They've had they've got some injury stuff that they're contending with to start the year. Mm-hmm. There's a lot going on there. I'm not saying it's going to be easy sledding, but I do feel that they kind of have to work their way out of it one step at a time. They made changes this summer too, not just with the roster. You remember they brought in Jarmo Kekalainen as a senior advisor in that front office. I think that they've, behind the scenes have tried to kind of bolster themselves someone like Yarmo, for example, was a GM in Columbus for a long time, a very sort of steady, patient guy. I think that, they've tried to basically strengthen themselves to get through some choppy waters. But, what would be the tone this morning had they lost that game to the Senators with Florida coming in? And I know the Panthers have dropped a couple games here and are dealing with their own injuries and the like, but it was a snowball running in the wrong direction, and one win doesn't change too much, but it does at least, stem the tide and give them some daylight. And, Zach Benson came back in the lineup, had a couple points in the game. I think there's things to build on there if you're the Sabres, and that's what they have to do.
So if you're the Sabres right now, here's your next 5 games. You mentioned the Panthers. The Montreal Canadiens are also in that 5. The Detroit Red Wings are there, and back-to-back games, a home and home against the Toronto Maple Leafs. Let's say things go back to being bad. And maybe it's too soon of a question to ask, and maybe it's not. How hot does Kevyn Adams' seat get? How much time does he have to try to right this ship and put this team on course towards making the playoffs?
Well, it's definitely hot. And look, you don't see GMs, face a true hot seat, I guess, in the first 4 games of the season too often, but he's been there for a number of years now as Kevyn Adams. Obviously you have Lindy Ruff, the head coach. He's on an expiring contract, and look, just by virtue of Lindy Ruff's age, that's not a long-term likely job for him just because, he's been around the league so long. I think that there couldn't be more urgency in Buffalo. And at a certain point, I think for the Sabres, this is going to become a business issue, right? It probably already is, but you saw, Julian, I'm sure the ticket prices on the secondary market for that Senators game. Like literally you could go to Starbucks and get a coffee this morning cheaper than, or for more expensive than you could have got tickets into that Sabres game last night. You mentioned, fans throwing jerseys on the ice and some of the vitriol you see online for them. I mean, they have to rebuild a lot of bridges in the community. Ultimately, I think you only do that through winning, through giving fans something to get excited about, through becoming, restoring sort of respect to the logo and the organization. And, that's Kevyn Adams' job. Now, as a GM, what can you do in season? I mean, he's lost Josh Norris again here. With reflection, I think that trade is a disaster on the Buffalo end of it, frankly. It's unfortunate, obviously, for Josh Norris that he's been injured a couple times, but the fact he's played, a handful of games since the deal was made, supposedly different issue than the one he dealt with at the end of last season in terms of the injury itself. But I mean, he was meant to be their top line center. It's not like the GM in any market can go out and find a top line center today. I just don't think that that's realistic or something that's you're not going to see that kind of caliber of player move perhaps all season, but certainly not in the first couple weeks of the season. So, if you're Kevyn Adams, you need the team to play well and to keep winning games. And that's where I think you can start with that Senators win, because they get behind, they come back, they stretch out a big lead. Then the Senators rally early in the third, right? There's a shaky moment there. Lindy Ruff calls a timeout. I mean, I think that those are all building blocks to go through that. And, it's a tough place to be with Sabres are right now, because they're being judged on the current roster and the current things that are happening, but they're also to some degree, they shoulder the weight of, a lot of teams, a lot of players, even other GMs and coaches that came before them.
Like, after Tim Stützle ties the game in the first period, the fans are booing. Like, the emotions very much on their sleeves. But then that second
a 1-1 goal
happened.
in the 4th game of the season, it's just, you can't actually underline how unusual that is, right? Like but it's very unusual to have an NHL team or team in any sport other than your New York Jets, I'm sorry to say, with a 14-year playoff drought, right? So, I mean, I don't blame the fans. I really don't. This is not a fan issue. It's an organizational issue that they've got to sort out. And as I expressed, I think there's still some reason for optimism with their roster. Like, I don't have a crystal ball, but, Josh Doan has played well. He came over in that offseason trade for JJ Peterka. Mm-hmm. It's not as though they're bereft of any talent or reason to be hopeful. It's just, they've got to align it and make it work. And frankly, they've got to rebuild a lot of trust in their market. And that's kind of what they're up against as an organization. And if not, I think changes are inevitable, because at a certain point, if you're the owner of the team, you just can't sit there and say, this is okay. And that's where organizations do get in trouble. I mean, way back when, this is a callback, but the whole idea of a Shana plan, like that whole nickname in Toronto, it actually came out of the fact that when Brendan Shanahan first took over as the Leafs president back in 2014, he just made an observation at a press conference. He's like, the problem in Toronto isn't coming up with a plan. He said the problem is sticking to a plan. And he's like, basically every year, every 2 years, they're going in a different direction. They prioritize this, prioritize that, trade this guy away. And he just didn't see a coherent kind of strategy. I think you do get into that danger when basically organizations head in the wrong direction and you keep, abruptly changing course, but at the same time doing the same thing is kind of the definition of madness. So anyway, the Sabres hope it doesn't have to come to that. I think it's certainly possible, though. I mean, there's certainly lots of rumblings that if this season goes off the rails, that there's going to have to be major changes for that organization. But, if they keep winning games, you and I won't be talking about this. There'll be no focus on that. And maybe eventually there'll be more butts in the seats and more enthusiasm from their fans, because, the good people of Buffalo deserve that.
Yep. I just want to make that clear. Even though we have talked a lot about how things are bad in Buffalo, I maintain if the Sabres turn this around and make this right, that's a team, that's an organization that so many people around the league would be like, finally, they found a way to make it work. And yes, you're right. The Sabres and the New York Jets share the dubious honor of holding the longest pro drought in North American sports. These teams have not made the playoffs since I was in high school.
And I was many birthdays ago.
Yeah, many birthdays ago, for sure. Yeah, the last thing I'll just say here is, the urgency is definitely there for the Sabres to do something. Thinking of the last few days where reports have come out where players have also made it known that, hey, something has to happen. Something has to change in the positive direction for this organization too. That adds to that urgency as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, look, they've got Alex Tuck, who's a pending UFA from the area. All things considered, I think would like to stay, but there's all kinds of consequences. You can't keep bleeding talent. If you're Buffalo, I don't think you gotta piece it together at some point.
Absolutely. We move on from the Buffalo Sabres to the Ottawa Senators, who, they were on the other side of that Buffalo Sabres victory. I would say yesterday was a bit of a tough day for them. The loss to Buffalo, pretty tough. Losing to Donovan Sabrango on waivers, I think, is tough for their depth. But no story bigger than their captain, Brady Tkachuk. As of yesterday, Michael Andlauer confirming that he went to New York City for a second opinion on his right-hand wrist injury that he suffered on Monday against Nashville. Just from talking to different people around the team, my expectation is that he'll likely go for surgery. Don't be surprised if that ends up being announced today. It seems as if that's when the team is going to know more about what's going on. Just a very tough situation for a team who's built so much around their leader. He's the straw that stirs the drink, as far as I'm concerned, in that organization. And it's not great. They'll have to find a way to do the next man up thing. But if you're the Ottawa Senators, not a great way to start your year at 1-3, including the fact you've lost to the Buffalo Sabres. What are your thoughts and reads on this situation?
Yeah, adversity has arrived early in Ottawa, and look, every team is going to face something at some point during the year. A significant injury, absence, a losing streak, but to get it all at once out of the gate, and obviously a season I think that started with lots of reason for optimism. It's the Senators are kind of in one to start the season. I think there's no way around that. Now, I still think they have the players to get out of it. I don't know that there's no reason to sound a crazy alarm bell just yet, but there's not a lot of time with the way the schedule is. They're playing again on Thursday night after the loss in Buffalo Wednesday to regroup. And, my sense is there's no sort of white knight on the horizon. I think that the Sens as an organization would like to look at maybe perhaps some bigger acquisitions in time this season. So versus, you lose Brady Tkachuk. It's not like you're just bringing in some random forward to kind of fill a spot. I think that, they'd like to look at, taking a bigger swing at some point during this year, but, the trade market's still pretty frozen at this point in time. And so, what that means is what you're hitting on there, Julian. I mean, it is a next man up circumstance. I think if you're looking for an area for them to start getting out of it, the goals against have to go down. That's obviously on the goalies, but it's on the specialty teams, penalty kill. It's on the forwards, even at 5-on-5. I mean, maybe they just have to adopt a different mentality, but the puck's just gone in the net too much too soon in the season, no matter who's been in the lineup or who's been on the ice or even between the pipes for them to have any amount of success. So, sometimes these sort of situations can actually be positive for a team. It can bring you together. It can force you to maybe adopt a certain mindset for how you need to play. But, it's crazy how this season I think there's probably more pressure, just there's a lot more attention in today's media world on all these teams. But it just feels like the season's barely began and then it's already, a 5-alarm fire in a few cities. And that's why I do caution. I think the Sens are good enough to play their way through it, but you don't want to find yourself 1-6 when we're doing this show next week, right? I mean, so it does, you got to you don't want to fall too far behind or else it'll get very crazy there. So, you've got a better feel for the day-to-day of the team, obviously being around them, but I don't think that there's any sort of magic fix coming here in the short term, even with this Tkachuk injury.
Yeah, that's basically how I have it too. And you mentioned the idea of them doing a bigger swing. I'm very curious how that could happen when your prospect pool. I mean, Carter Yakupchuk and Logan Hensler are at the top of it. I don't know if that prospect is on the higher end compared to other teams. Oh, and you don't have your first round pick for this year. I would
second round picks are still worth a lot.
Yes, that's true.
There can be player for player trades too, right? That was the deal that got them Dylan Cousins last year, right? They traded actual players for players. So you're right. I think it can take a lot of forms, and the way the Sens front office works, I actually think that they're kind of open to do it. I don't think they're locked in on it has to be this for that. I think that they are kind of. They like to sit back and try to think outside the box a little bit and find different ways to get things done. So, where there's a will, there's a way. I don't even know when the trade market's going to, actually get moving again though. That's the other side, not just, obviously that doesn't just pertain to Ottawa. I think there's a lot of teams around the league, that would like to do some, to get some action going, but we just haven't seen much happen. It's kind of a weird time. I'm a little concerned for this season that we might not see the normal movement we usually do. But of course, sometimes there's a domino effect with one or two trades, and off we go.
The Phoenix Copley trade. Maybe that's the domino.
That doesn't count as a trade.
Okay, fine. Sorry.
Just because he was claimed on waivers by Tampa from LA with the understanding he would go back there, if their injury situation with Vasilevsky was okay, which obviously did. So,
okay.
Well, that's basically like an undo. That's like hitting Control Z or Control Z on a waiver claim.
It's the first time I've ever heard Control Z in the context of a player. Unless there's anything else you want to add about the Ottawa Senators, I do have one more question. I would love to know your thoughts on.
We didn't even mention this though. Both Tkachuk brothers injured. Not great for Team USA. Now I know that we're a long way from the Olympics, and certainly
they both would definitely want to be there for that.
Brady and Matthew are both projected to be back playing the NHL long before Milan tournament starts in February. But there must be some concern somewhere in the USA Hockey brain trust. Seeing two of their kind of heartbeat players in addition to guys they need to be impactful sidelined as well.
Oh no! To your point, I'm going to be very curious to see when both of those guys are healthy enough to play, what games they get in before the Olympics, and then their effectiveness during that tournament. And I can't speak for Florida Panthers fans, but knowing Ottawa Senators fans the way I do, at least in the year I've been here, they're going to be watching that Olympic tournament with Brady Tkachuk with holding their breath the whole time. It's just... there's definitely going to be a lot of that considering this injury to Brady.
Well, we know the way they play, right? These both sides of the brothers here is they're not going to preserve their bodies. I mean, they put it all on the line for their teams, for their countries. I mean, that's part of what makes them who they are. But I think Brady really stirred the drink you mentioned in Ottawa, but for the Four Nations team USA, I mean, that was pretty clear watching even the Amazon series, but also just watching the games in real time. I mean, he was such an important contributor, scored a goal in that final game against Canada, and was kind of a heartbeat type of player. So, I can't help but think of when we see injury news or anything that gets longer term, we're viewing it through the NHL prism, but also what it means for the national teams. And the run up to the Olympics is officially going right now.
Oh yeah, and for those brothers in particular, the Olympics, that's a priority for them, especially Brady, who, look, you can't tell me otherwise. Last year, he looked at the Four Nations as his first opportunity of playing meaningful games. Oh yeah, he wants that.
Well, and he talked about how he felt it helped him on the other side of it too, right? And when the Sens made the push and ultimately qualified for the playoffs, and took the Leafs to 6 games, I think it. Well, I understand you're worried that one of your best players goes to that tournament and comes back injured, but I would say there's also there's a corollary there that it might push players to another level, and especially someone like him, I think can stand to benefit from being in that heat and gaining confidence, and really truly reminding himself, I'm one of the impact guys in the league right now.
Okay, one final Ottawa Senators question for you.
Mm-hmm.
Give me your thoughts on their alternate third jersey.
Now, I'm not much of a style guy, so take my opinion with a grain of salt, but I did not love the look on my television set, I got to say. I haven't seen them in the building, but they kind of, it's a lot of red and a lot of lines, but, honestly, I can never tell though. It seems like the minute any team unveils a new third jersey or whatever, there's like a lot of our colleagues, including you, who have much style. Like everyone's got an opinion on them. Like half the time I'm just like, whatever. It's just a jersey. But yeah, that one, it's not my favorite on first viewing on TV. I'll say that.
Yeah, it's not my favorite too. I recognize
it's kind of like an old school, like McDonald's uniform,
Oh,
the red and yellow. I don't know. It just feels.
Oh, no.
I don't know why I thought of like Ronald McDonald or something.
Oh, no. You're going to get us in trouble with Sens fans. No.
What, is it popular? I don't even know. Do people like it or?
So like, I think it's one of those things where Sens fans, at least from what I've seen, they're saying that it's growing on them. I think in person they look a little bit better than what they looked like, at least as a mock-up beforehand. I still think they're just okay at best, but it's been really fascinating seeing Sens fans be like, yeah, like these jerseys are growing on us. And then everyone else outside the market's like, oh man, these jerseys are trash. I had friends throughout the game like text me, be like, yo, these jerseys are ugly. Like
they did not present well on TV. I'll say that. Like they really didn't. But
they definitely look like a jersey. I don't mean this as a negative. Like I think it's more just neutral than anything. Someone definitely would have like made those jerseys as like a custom jersey on like EA Sports NHL or something. They were kind of remind me of that. They gave me that feel. But like just the shoulders, I'm not crazy about. Like the gold is maybe a little bit too much gold.
There's a lot of lines, isn't there?
Yeah. I think that, you know what? I think you have it perfect. There's too many lines on the jersey. Too many lines.
But again, like take my
even
style.
On the pants.
I gotta say it though. Like I gotta call it on myself. Take my style sense with a grain of salt. So
it's okay. I think they're just okay. I think there are people around the league.
This is like your uncle, like grading out, like what you're wearing to school or something. Like it's really not worth that much.
Yeah, as long as you're not telling people to like pull their pants up and all that, like you're fine. Wear a belt.
Wear a belt, son.
All right. Well, at some point we'll have Big Money CJ with his jersey opinions. We'll do that as a future segment. But no, the we don't have to do that. I'm kidding. But yeah, the Ottawa Senators, obviously, situation we're going to keep monitoring. The last thing I'll just say here, I do share that they have some of those players to get out of it. They just need to actually do it. But of course, like you can't really replace a Brady Tkachuk. It is what it is.
Quit giving up 5 goals a night, or it's going to be a long season.
The PK needs to be so much better. The
Yeah.
PK needs to be so much better too. They've allowed 8 goals through their first 4 games. They're perfect against the Nashville Predators, but like when the Buffalo Sabres, who had no power play goals entering
Well, the
That
Buffalo
game
barely
on
had any
Wednesday.
goals, as we mentioned, right?
Yes.
At all,
Yes.
period. And then they
Yes.
scored 8.
And,
Now,
and
empty
then,
net and all that, but still.
But then, like, 3 of those goals are power play goals. Like, you got to figure something out with that. Anyway, we've spoken our piece with the Ottawa Senators. As of yesterday, CJ, the 5 players acquitted in the Hockey Canada trial, eligible to sign with an NHL team. We've been following the Carter Hart situation as it stands. Any update on him?
Yeah, I would say I have no reason to believe that anything is amiss here. I do believe he's still going to wind up with the Vegas Golden Knights organization, but there's a couple things to consider, right? Carter Hart, as with any of the other 4 players, can't play an NHL game again until December 1st at the earliest. So while there's obviously a degree of urgency to get him, up to speed after not playing a professional game in almost 2 years, there's not necessarily any, begging reason he needed to sign on October 15th or October 16th or October 17th. The Golden Knights themselves too, would have cap ramifications for making that kind of signing if they were to do it right now. And so, I'm sure that there's a lot of dialogue on their end about the best way to approach this. And I would say as well, there's maybe some different ways that maybe he ends up joining Henderson first or something like that. But, all in all, I don't know the exact machinations of how it's going to go down, but I still expect Carter Hart to join the Golden Knights organization and to work his way back to a point where, he's likely going to resume his NHL career with that team after the NHL's reinstatement officially takes hold, and which is still 6-7 weeks away from now. So, I don't have any thoughts on the other players or any information to share in terms of them getting back. Obviously, Michael McLeod signed in the KHL. Alex Formanton still playing in Switzerland. Cal Foote was kind of an in-betweener even, prior to any of this. So I, don't know what his path back looks like. Dylan Dubé, haven't been able to get any kind of, clear intel on where his future lies. But, Carter Hart, I do believe is going to get up and running here in North America at some point. And that's all kind of being worked on, exactly what that's going to look like, because, just from the straight hockey perspective here, he hasn't played games. The Golden Knights look like they need some help in net. I mean, this is not related at all, but Aiden Hill did get injured the other night in Calgary. Not at all tying the two together again, because Carter Hart can't play a game for some time. But Akira Schmid has been his backup to start this year and spent most of last year in the AHL. And so, I think for Carter Hart, the most important thing from hockey, lens is trying to find somewhere where he can reestablish himself as an NHL player, because it's not a guarantee. And, doing so behind a good team with a place to get starts makes a lot of sense. And I think him and Vegas are still a fit, but they're still working on exactly how that's going to be rolled out.
Okay, we'll keep an eye on that. Let's move on to the Olympics. February could be a big time. The Olympic Games going on, and of course, best on best coming back. But there seems to be some concerns about some construction issues regarding the arena for the Olympic Games for the NHL players to play on. Gary Bettman at least bringing that up to media yesterday. What's your read on Gary Bettman's comments regarding preparations for the Olympic Games?
Well, the facts are the facts, right? They're building a new indoor arena, which will be the main host of the hockey events in Milan. There'll be a secondary arena as well. But the main arena was supposed to hold a test event in December, essentially make sure everything's working properly, an under 18 type of tournament, but with the goal of obviously testing out the facilities prior to the start of the Olympic Games. And that's now been pushed aside because it's not going to be ready yet by December. And so, if you're the NHL, you're a guest at the Olympics. Like, it's not Gary Bettman or Marty Walsh or Ron Hainsey or anyone, involved in bringing the players to the Olympic Games to have the venues ready. I mean, that's on the ILC ultimately, and then obviously the host committee for those games. And so I think there is reason for concern. I'll tell you one other kind of quirk, but I was told by someone that the arena itself, when it's done, is going to be 4 feet too short, from what an NHL arena would be in terms of the length. So there's some quirks that'll potentially be there with that arena. But, I think the league And the players, want some assurances, of course, that it's going to be up to the standard of what you'd expect for that kind of tournament. And right now they don't have those assurances. This has happened before. I have to say, like, I remember going over to cover the Sochi games in 2014. And frankly, I got to Sochi maybe a week or so before the tournament started. And it felt like the entire place, they were still finishing the construction. Actually, like ripping, like they're like, it's like they're unwrapping the bubble or something, right, in real time. So this isn't necessarily new to this Olympics, but it does impact the NHL players specifically. And I don't think there's a plan B. Like if for some reason that arena doesn't get done, like I don't know what happens to the tournament. I have to think with 4 months of runway and already this sort of level of concern that there's going to be a way to accelerate construction, but I don't know. And we're not going to see it in any hockey event before the game. So the very first game played in that arena might be, I don't know what the schedule looks like, whether it's a women's game or a men's game, but an actual Olympic game might be the first one, which isn't ideal because obviously sometimes with construction, things don't go perfectly. You got to see what's working and what doesn't, but anyway, that's kind of where we're at with that. And you can understand where the league's concern comes from. And as I mentioned, the teams themselves are preparing for a rink that isn't even full exact standard for what an NHL size rink is, which is kind of another quirk to think about.
What about the players' accommodations? You wrote a really interesting piece at The Athletic. NHL players receive a warning on Milan Olympic Village. Not going to be perfect. The players heard, this is verbatim from your article, the players heard that an enhanced dorm experience will await them if they have the privilege of checking into building number 5 of the Milan Athletes Village in February. That's interesting. An enhanced dorm experience. It's not the Ritz-Carlton.
Did you ever live in a dorm?
No.
Oh, because you went to college or university in your hometown, so you didn't do
right.
That.
But also, even when I went to grad school away, like I didn't do a dorm. I lived in an apartment. I had roommates, but like it was in like a proper apartment, not like a school like dorm.
Right. Well, once upon a time, I lived at Pittman Hall, which was the dorm at my university. It used to be known as Ryerson University, now Toronto Metropolitan University. And I think fondly of those times. But, let's face it, I've lived in much comfier places in the years since than that dorm. Look, this falls under, I think we would call first world problems. But, I had the ability to sit in on some of the meetings that were held around the Olympic camp in Calgary. And, some of the reporting for that story just reflects what the players were told, essentially, is, keep in mind, this is the first time NHL players have been back at the Olympics for 12 years. As a result of that, the vast majority of them will be at their first ever Olympics. From the Canadian team, you have Sidney Crosby is the only one that'll be left over for sure from 2014. Drew Doughty's a possibility, maybe John Tavares, but, you're talking a handful of guys that have ever been through this. And so I think that they got an eyes wide open view of what to expect. There was even sort of what I think was a half joke. I don't think it was serious, but it was like, if you see a banana anywhere, just grab it because, the food situation might not be what you're used to. And let's face it, these guys, it's partly codified in the CBA for NHL players, but, they get treated very, very well. They're world-class athletes. They're the best at what they do. And the sport makes a lot of money on their backs. And as a result of that, they fly in a certain manner. They stay at a certain level of hotels that the average person probably doesn't stay at. They have personal chefs in basically every arena I've been at, and with home rinks for teams. They got protein shakes after their skates. They got kind of everything dialed in so that they can be at their best, right? I mean, and frankly, I'm not making fun of this, but the truth is, you go to an Olympics, it's not just about the hockey players, right? Like where the Canadian athletes are staying and where the other NHL players are staying, there'll be, speed skaters in those venues, figure skaters, short track speed skaters. And, the scheduling even is wonky. I wish I had it. It's in my story, but I think the gold medal game in Milan will be played at 2:00 local. But prior to that, keep in mind, a team that gets the gold medal will only play 6 games. A team could have played at like noon to 9 p.m., 4 p.m., like all in a 10-day span. Like think about a typical NHL schedule. I realize there are some afternoon games mixed in there, but everything is so regimented in the NHL. And so between staying in a dorm room, maybe not controlling the food situation the way you would like to, doesn't mean the food will all be bad, but it might not be tailored to the degree a lot of these players are used to. They're going to have to take buses that are sort of secured with tape because you're going kind of in the safe zone of the Olympics. The secondary rink in Milan the players were told is a 45-minute drive on a good day from the athletes' village. So if you can imagine, if any team plays there and does a morning skate there and a game, like that's 3 hours of total travel time. It's going to be hard to see your families. There's a lot of sacrifices. I think we don't have to sit here and say, oh, poor athletes, but I think it's worth recognizing you get to that event. That's the pinnacle of your sport in a lot of ways. And there are some challenges that the athletes have to be ready for in order to prepare themselves to be at their best. And so that was kind of the function of the story. I do think it's interesting. I spoke to John Tavares actually, who was in Sochi with Team Canada and is a very regimented guy. Like a lot of, when I think of what John Tavares' career is, like, just talk about steady, man. Like he's really routine oriented. He's obviously doesn't leave any stone unturned in terms of his diet and his preparation, his stretching routines, all these things. He walks around an NHL season with a backpack full of everything he needs to make sure he's at his best. And he did acknowledge in Sochi, it was like, it's not a complaint, but he's like, the food wasn't that great. And, the timing of things was kind of weird. He said like he loved actually the athletes' village, that even though maybe it's not, what they're used to in terms of hotels, he said like it was actually cool for him to get to like hang out with the curlers and hang out with other Canadian athletes. And that was something he really appreciated. He said actually some of the amenities for like workouts away from the rink were really good there, but he just said it's different. And, I think the reason that Canadian players were told what they were told at the Olympic camp when I sat in on that meeting actually wasn't as a complaint. It was more like, look, this is the same for everybody. And the sort of more you realize this ahead of time, the better we're going to be as a team, because when you get over there, if you're focused on everything that isn't right or isn't what you're used to, you're kind of wasting energy. And so I think they were just told it in those terms, which was pretty stark, because basically, they want to use it to their advantage. Like, get used to this as an idea, understand it's going to be a little weird or funky. But you're representing your country on the highest stage of sport. But let's assume the arena's finised, I guess.
Yes.
Like there's a lot, you're sensing a theme here, right? Like this is like,
yeah, I hope that gets done too. Their arena.
The athletes' village is done. I will say that the athletes' village is complete. So the enhanced dorm room is ready to go. They just need the athletes to check in a few months' time.
I'm just waiting for the Athletic in-depth story on Canada's time at the tournament and all the fun adventures they had in their little dorms. Someone like Brad Marchand, like cooking ramen on a stove or something just to like pass the time.
Cup of noodles in his room. Just hoarding his banana pile from all the ones he found.
Oh my God. Yeah, I'm looking to you for those stories specifically, CJ.
And I'll say this. The other side of this is the other pro athletes that go to the Olympics, tend to stay not in the Olympic Village. Like it's also one thing that makes hockey unique, that the players, actually value that. And I checked in with some people that would know this. Like they said, the experience that, this will be the 6th Olympics that the NHL has sent players to. The experience in the past, while like it hasn't been perfect, like some of those things have been challenges. Like the players have overwhelmingly loved being in the village, have loved being kind of part of the wider Olympic movement, understanding when they get there, it's not just about them. That's part of what makes us unique. It's part of what I think draws the athletes to want to make their national teams and be there and compete. So this isn't all a complaint. But the NBA players, for example, when they go to the summer games, stay in luxury hotels. And even some of the tennis players who are obviously pros, like Novak Djokovic, who won the gold medal in Paris in 2024, he stayed at a luxury hotel. I mean, I guess the point is not all athletes opt to do what the NHL and the players agree to here. They see it as a feature, not a bug of the experience. But also, let's not look past the fact it's kind of like going away to summer camp and you maybe don't have everything you have at home that you're used to, basically.
and your roommates are.
I mean, Oliver Ekman
millionaires.
Larsson told me, like, he was there for Sweden in Sochi, won a silver medal at the Swedes. He said, like, yeah, I remember there was a McDonald's there. Like, you know, again, you can't believe how finely tuned these athletes are in their day-to-day life. Like, alcohol is more or less a non-factor for them during the season. You know, I'm sure everybody has a cheat meal here or there, but like most of these guys don't even eat like one bad, you know, like one thing that you or I might consider just like, oh, we're doing this every couple days. Like they're not, like everything is measured and done with precision. And obviously that's part of what's pushed them to the top of the sporting world. But I think some of that gets suspended when they get to the Olympics, essentially.
Because how dare they put a Big Mac in their mouth?
Well, I'm not here to judge. I'm not here to judge.
Me
but
neither.
yeah,
Me neither.
like, I mean, for the calories these guys burn, they could use to find a few in unique ways, like maybe a Big Mac.
Yeah. Well, good on your reporting with the accommodations for Hockey Canada, and as well as
it's not just them though. I should be clear. I mean, it literally is the same for the U.S. team. Like, this isn't a case of Hockey Canada complaining about anything. It's the truth is every country that sends men's players to this games will be experiencing the same thing. There's nothing preventing them, by the way, from getting hotels. Like, it's not like the league says you're locked in and you have to stay here. But, you know, obviously I think the teams like to be together. You know, I was told that, for example, if a player's family and maybe his wife or his partner comes over and is staying at a hotel and there's a free night, yeah, like he can go and stay a night in that hotel or whatever. Like, this isn't jail or anything. I just don't want to misrepresent it in any way. But fact is, a lot of these guys nowadays, the veterans in the NHL do not have roommates on the road. I don't know if the average person knows that. Most players will have it. Yeah. Veteran players in the NHL don't have roommates on the road. Everyone basically here more or less will have a roommate, and it will be in an enhanced storeroom. John Tavares mentioned Drew Doughty was his roommate in Sochi, and he said they had quite a calamity getting packed up after they won the gold medal and getting to the plane to fly out of there. So, you know, like, it sounds like, honestly, for some of these guys, these are good memories, but it's definitely not their normal existence that they're experiencing right now in the NHL.
And with that, it's time for stick taps. I have, and this could easily be our shared stick tap. I wanted to give a stick tap to the Montreal Canadiens for their pregame tribute to the late Ken Dryden, who passed away due to cancer in September. Just the speeches, the highlights shown of Ken Dryden, a really great touch by the Canadiens. And then at the very end, just the shot of the vacant goal net with his old mask on top of it. There's no team in the NHL that does those tributes and celebrations better than the Montreal Canadiens, as far as I'm concerned. And I think they did a job well done with honoring not just one of the greatest Montreal Canadiens to ever play, one of the greatest goaltenders to play the sport as a whole. So I will give the Montreal Canadiens a stick tap for the Ken Dryden tribute. That could be our shared one unless you have your own, but I figured it was worth mentioning.
Yeah, they really are the best. Ken Dryden's The Game was a book I read a lot as a kid. I've actually got an autographed version of it that someone gave me for a prior birthday. I think it was my 25th birthday. It's actually in the part of his inscription, like happy 25th, Chris, or whatever. I think it was my 25th, but special guy. And they're so good. Even having Bob Gainey read a section from The Game that was like played over, like that. They're just, you know, obviously they have such a rich history to draw from and to illuminate. But then on top of that, you know, I don't know if it's one person who's in charge of coming up with those ceremonies or if it's a group effort, but bravo to whoever does. I was going to give mine on maybe a happier note to Frank Nazar. Had a really nice start to a season in Chicago. Obviously got that big contract in the offseason, but I don't know if you saw that goal he scored on Wednesday night where he walks Jake Neighbors, you know, beautiful goal, and then gets jumped by Neighbors but doesn't really respond and then just like wriggles free and then it still celebrates his goal. I'm just giving a little tip of the hat because he's had a great start to the season. That was kind of
watching it live and holy crap, this is crazy.
Yeah, and then he gets like jumped, but he just keeps celebrating, like he doesn't engage in like a fight. And
he's just celebrating.
So yeah, I'll hat tip that play or stick tap that play, but also just he's had a really nice start to the season and obviously has been a part of the success the Blackhawks are having. But that was a moment I enjoyed seeing on Wednesday night and it's fresh in my mind. So Stick tap to you, Frank the Czar. Keep it up.
What's a cooler celebration? Him getting up after that dog pile to celebrate, or him doing the 6-7 in preseason? I think it was preseason he did it.
I'm supposed to say 6-7 because I know that's big with the kids, but I like the one in that game in St. Louis.
You don't have to say 6-7 at all. I don't understand what the hell it means.
You don't have to understand. You're even 20 years too old to understand.
I think so. Yeah. I think people get to a point where they realize they've aged out of like what's cool on with the youth. I think 6-7 might be my drop off point, or maybe just like
you're definitely not alone. I was with some family over the weekend, Thanksgiving up here in Canada, and my 10-year-old nephew was like very dialed in on the 6-7. But I also have a 20-year-old, niece and nephew, and they felt like they were too old. Like they don't really get it. It's not registering with their generation or their whatever, however you define that. So it's the real youths of today that are driving that one, Julian. So just let them have it. Just let them have it. We don't need to understand it. We just need to respect it,
Shout out to the Ute Dem. We'll let you have this one. Thank you so much for tapping into today's edition of the Chris Johnston Show. Get your questions in now for Ask CJ. We'll get to them on our next episode to start off next week. CJ, great work as always, man.
Let's go Blue Jays. That's all I need. One more Jays win for my birth. That's the only birthday present I'm asking for. I know it's a lot. Let's go Blue Jays.
Anything else you want to say about the Game 3 victory?
Nope. That's one. The beast is awake, but we need another one on Thursday night.
For CJ, I'm Julian. So long and peace.
The Chris Johnston Show. Follow Chris on Twitter @ReporterChris and follow Julian @JKA McKenzie.
The Chris Johnston Show.